So, what's the difference between spatial and temporal aspects of an animation? Exactly what parts of an animation do they refer to? When we say spatial aspects, we mean how individual parts move, change, and interact like this. When we say temporal aspects, we mean an overall sequence or process a given movement or change goes through from the beginning to the end. When we design an animation, we often need to give emphasis to either spatial or temporal information, but not to both. But why? Let's talk about giving emphasis to temporal information. How should we design an animation if we're going to give emphasis to temporal information? Let's watch this judo throw animation a few times. What exactly were you able to extract from this animation? The whole sequence only took less than a second, so I'm guessing that the only thing you've managed to get was the overall sequence or flow of movements in which the judo throw was executed. This animation sort of disregarded smaller individual movements like hand grips, where exactly you need to step in, the angle of your feet, directions in which you need to pull and push your opponent with your arms, and so on. In other words, this animation was designed with an emphasis to temporal information in mind. Think of temporal information as an overall sequence or flow of movements and changes. Now let's talk about giving emphasis to spatial information. How should we design an animation if we are going to give emphasis to spatial information? Here's a different animation that depicts the same judo throw, but with an emphasis to spatial information this time. It might have distracted you from seeing the overall flow of movements, but I'm sure it was much easier to see and understand individual moves involved in the throw. So in both animations you just watched, a trade-off was made between depicting temporal patterns and depicting spatial patterns. Then why do you think this trade-off between temporal and spatial emphases is beneficial to learning? When both temporal and spatial patterns are equally emphasized in an animation, processing and keeping up with both spatial and temporal patterns of an animation can be quite taxing to our perception and mind. It's especially true when an animation with regard to spatial aspects involves high element interactivity, meaning a lot of movements and changes taking place at the same time. The judo throw animation you just watched showed literally 10 or more essential bodily moves and positions necessary to execute the throw successfully. Depicting them all in an animation can easily overload the learner's cognitive processing capacity, so be careful. Creating a super realistic animation by including all the spatial and temporal details just because a real-world event or action has them is not going to make a good animation for learning. So next, let's take an even closer look at how to design a better animation according to how we learned from animations.